There's been a lot of talk about battles and capturing sectors to gain more income, but what are industrial logistics? Industrial logistics are your income in this game. Every round you generate industrial logistics to spend on your plans to achieve victory. Industrial logistics represent your force's ability to organize and project power on the battlefield. Keep in mind, the forces of the Great War did not have unlimited resources, nor were resources allocated entirely by good sense. For you to increase your share of the industrial logistics available on the wider battlefield, you will need to prove your section of front is an investment that can attract and excite the support of high command. This theme has come up several times in this video, but a common trap new players fall into is playing too passive, hoping for the opponent to make an opportunistic mistake. However, while this may seem like a good strategy, it will bore and annoy high command, causing them to divert resources away from you. If you find your industrial logistics continuously falling, there is a good chance you are failing to take the risks with your men high command is looking for. Every planning phase, players each generate logistics based on their individual position on the income tracker board, which is located on the back of the game box. Players keep track of their faction's position on the board using tokens that represent their nation. Paper industrial logistics currency is handed out to both players, which is only useful in the planning phase. There are numerous things your industrial logistics may be used for. They may be spent on units, which will wait in your muster area as reserve troops until you actually deploy them. You also spend industrial logistics on supply, which will need to be rationed across your forces for the remainder of the turn. After the planning phase, there is no way to generate additional supply for the board aside from a few tactics cards. Industrial logistics may also be used to directly purchase sector features like trenches and barbed wire, or remove crater damage without the need of an engineer unit. While this comes at an increased cost and can only be used in sectors up to your frontline trench, a rapid deployment of a sector feature could be critical for success in the following phases. You can also spend industrial logistics on drawing additional tactics cards or reinforcing damaged units. At the start of the game, filling your hand with useful tactics cards could be a winning strategy or an expensive blunder. All purchases in the planning phase formally stay secret from your opponent. You only have to declare the total amount you spend, not what you actually bought. You do place your purchases on the board in your supply depot, and you can tell your opponent you bought whatever you like. That uncertainty is a real part of the strategy. Not knowing what's coming makes it harder to plan their defense. While not disclosing purchases or lying about a unit purchase adds strategic uncertainty, cheating is completely unacceptable and would ruin the game entirely, so don't do it. Any player caught cheating automatically suffers a dishonorable surrender. This game is finely balanced, and even cheating to add a single supply can give a player a completely unfair advantage. Your income moves up or down every casualty phase, based on your performance in the battle. High command will reallocate resources away from a stale-defended front line, and will rush resources in to plug an opening or exploit a breakthrough. More important than the lives of your men is ensuring high command sees your front as one worth investing in, increasing your share of frontline industrial logistics. A word of warning. If a player would ever fall below the lowest point on the income tracker board, their opponent wins a total victory provided at least one full round has been completed. They have either achieved a total breakthrough or you have been sacked from the command structure. Either way, pay attention to your income and keep it from falling too low at all costs. Lastly, you're free to hold on to industrial logistics between turns too. You don't have to spend everything the moment you get it. Check the player screen for all your purchasing options to ensure you are spending your industrial logistics on what you need. Now we will discuss supply. Supply is your other core resource. It represents ammunition, food, medical gear, guns, shells, all the stuff an army actually needs to keep fighting. You will need much more supply than you think, so while it can be tempting to buy several new units, if you lack the supply to use them or to get them to the front, there may be little point. Supply you purchase in the planning phase sits safely in your supply depot, which can never be directly attacked until you move it out onto the board during the preparatory phase. A single supply costs a single industrial logistics to generate. This adds up fast when the big guns are howling. Moving supply is free over open ground, trenches, and fortifications. Craters apply a cost to moving supply, and remember gas tokens count as craters for the purpose of supply movement. It costs 1 supply to move any number of supply into a sector that contains a crater. It also costs 1 supply to move any supply out of a sector that contains a crater. Each crater increases the cost by 1 to a maximum of 4. A sector that contains barbed wire or 5 or more craters is completely impassable to your supply. Sectors occupied by enemy units or enemy supply are also impassable to your supply. For example, in the preparatory phase, if a player has a pile of 6 supply they need to move through a sector with 2 craters present, they must pay 2 supply to place the remaining 4 supply in that sector. The player then must pay 2 more supply to move the remaining 2 supply to the target sector. While battlefields are initially dominated by open ground and free moving supply, artillery shelling can rapidly increase the cost of your logistics. Each movement of supply is its own action. If you move some supply through a sector and pay a cost to do so, only to realize you need more, you'll have to pay that cost to move the additional supply. Think carefully about where you'll need that supply and the costs of moving it in advance. When a unit moves, it may bring as much supply with it as the unit has total strength remaining. If a unit moves into a sector with supply, the unit may pick up this supply and continue moving with it, provided the total supply moved does not exceed the unit's existing strength value. All supply moved in this way ignores the regular cost of moving supply over terrain, and the supply carried by a unit may potentially be moved into a sector which would normally be impassable to that supply. Enemy supply can also be captured and potentially put into use for your forces. If one of your units ever moves into a sector with any enemy supply, the enemy supply is immediately destroyed. However, for every 2 enemy supply destroyed in this way, you may add a single supply of your own to the sector. You'll be spending supply constantly. Ranged attacks need supply. Increasing a unit's movement characteristic requires supply. Engineers use supply to build sector features. Tactics cards sometimes require the use of existing supply. Being short of supply can see machine guns stop in a moment of critical importance. While having supply with no units to use is a problem, make sure your forces have the supply they need to be effective. One risk to watch for: if a unit ever gets completely cut off from your supply lines, surrounded with no way to reach it, it has to spend 1 supply each casualty phase just to hold itself together. If the unit can't pay that upkeep, it takes a single strength damage. So when you're buying supply in the planning phase, it's worth thinking ahead. Not just how much you're buying, but how you're actually going to get it to where your units need it once the shooting starts. This covers both of your main resources, industrial logistics and supply. Remember to check the player guide screen when making purchases to see what will bring your side the best value.